Whatever lives in my basement isn't human anymore. Not sure if this story will make any sense to people who haven't experienced homelessness or what it's like to live out of your car with your kids. It's the most difficult thing I have ever done in my life. And I don't think people really understand how hard it is until they've lived through it themselves. My son and I had been living in my Honda Odyssey for about 8 months. We were staying in a campground near where we grew up. We were finally getting our lives back together after going through a divorce. I was looking for work, just trying to get us somewhere that we could go and stay that wasn't a tent, and I found an apartment. It was small, but it was perfect for us. When I called the landlord, he told me he needed a security deposit and first month's rent before we could move in. That meant that I needed a little bit of money up front to be able to do that. For the first week or so, I was looking everywhere for work. No one would hire me without a home address. I was worried because I had less than 2 weeks to find the money. I'd gotten a few odd jobs here and there, but it wasn't enough to pay the deposit and the rent. Then I saw a job online that said all experience levels were welcome. It was for a farm about 30 minutes away. Thought I might as well apply. So the next day I got a call saying that they wanted me to come in and fill out an application. I drove there and it was a dairy farm. They milked about 2,000 cows twice a day. I talked to the farm manager and I told him about my situation. I explained that I was desperate to get out of my van and get into a house and I needed this job. He said that he understood and he hired me on the spot. I was so excited when I told my son that I had a job. He was happy for me, and he was happy that we wouldn't have to live in the car anymore. I started working right away. Within a couple of days, I was making more than enough to cover the security deposit and first month's rent. I was so relieved. All I could think about was getting out of the van. It was Saturday afternoon when I found out I had made enough money. I went to the bank, took out the money, and I drove straight to the landlord. I paid him the money, and I moved right in, helped my son unload his stuff from the car, and then he went to take a shower. While he was gone, I heard something dragging metal moans coming from the basement. I didn't think much of it. I assumed that it was probably just mice or something. Then I heard the sound again. It was definitely coming from the basement. This time I heard heavy footsteps, followed by a loud thud. I don't know why, but I decided to check it out. As I stood at the top of the basement stairs, I listened closely. There were some noises down there, but I couldn't tell exactly what they were. The steps were creaking under my weight, and the banister was very squeaky. So I couldn't tell where the noises were coming from. I walked over to the corner and I found a flashlight on the floor. I turned it on and I looked around. All I saw was a washer and dryer combo unit and a hot water heater. I thought maybe the noises had come from the washer. Maybe someone had left their laundry in the washer and it had fallen apart. I climbed the steps and walked over to the washer. The door was open and the drum was empty. I closed the door and I turned the dial. Nothing had been left inside. I looked inside the dryer, but nothing was in there either. There was no way that a person could have fit inside. Then I heard the sound again. This time it was definitely coming from behind the washer and dryer units. I shut off the light and I felt around the wall until I found an outlet. I reached behind the units and flipped the switch. The light flickered on, and I could see a dark figure standing behind the appliances. I screamed, and the thing flinched. Whatever it was tall and thin, like a skeleton. It had a pair of legs and 2 arms. It was hunched over with its head resting on its knees. The thing started to drag itself out from behind the machines. I couldn't see its face, but I could see that it was wearing a pair of dirty old overalls. Then it stopped, and it slowly raised its head. I want to describe what its face looked like, but no matter how I try to put it into words, it still won't do it justice. Its face was white, almost translucent. It had a nose, but it was long and pointed, like a cone. It reminded me of those ancient Egyptian statues with the long noses. Its mouth was wide and red, kind of like an upside-down heart. Its eyes were huge. They were black and soulless. It looked at me for a moment and then it spoke. Its voice sounded like nails on a chalkboard. It was raspy and scratchy. It spoke in a language that I couldn't understand, but I got the gist of what it was saying. It told me that I was in its home, and it demanded that I leave. I froze. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. All I could do was stare at it as it continued to speak. I don't remember exactly what it said, but I remember that it told me that it had unseen another human being in a long time. It said that it had been waiting for someone to come down the stairs and talk to it. It asked me if I was going to hurt it, and then it started to cry. Whatever this thing was, it was sad. It was lonely, and even though it looked scary, I felt bad for it. I wanted to comfort it, but I couldn't move. Wanted to tell it that I wouldn't hurt it, but I couldn't speak. Stood there staring at it for what seemed like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. Finally, I found my voice. I told the creature that I wouldn't hurt it. I promised that I wouldn't tell anyone that it was there. In return, I asked it to please stay quiet. I didn't want to hear it dragging itself around the basement while I was trying to sleep. It agreed, and it disappeared behind the washer and dryer units. Every night when I went to bed, I would hear it dragging itself around the basement. Sometimes I would hear it talking to itself. It never said anything nice. It always sounded angry and upset. But I never went down there to see what it was doing. I kept my promise. A few weeks passed and I started to feel comfortable in my new home. I made it a place where I could feel safe and start my life over. Every night I would listen to whatever lived in my basement scream and yell, and I would hold my breath until it fell silent. One night I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. They weren't the same type of footsteps that the creature made. These were normal footsteps. Someone was coming down the basement stairs. I hid in the closet until I heard the door close. Then I came out and I crept toward the stairs. I peered over the railing and I saw my son standing in the basement. I asked him what he was doing down there, and he said he was looking for a place to hide. He climbed the stairs and went back upstairs. A few seconds later, he came back down and he said, "Gotcha." He was playing a game and he was trying to hide. I told him that there was no need to play hide and seek in my house. Looked up at me and he said, "But I already found a good hiding spot." I asked him where he was going to hide, but he just smiled and ran back down the stairs. I knew exactly where he was going. My son loves my basement monster. He goes down there every day to hang out with it. He brings it toys, and he asks it questions, and he listens while it talks to him. Whatever lives in my basement isn't human anymore, but somehow it seems less lonely now that my son has found it.